Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. As we get settled here, please, get your drinks and have a seat, be settled, and enjoy the afternoon. My name is Petra Dirkes-Thran. On behalf of VPTL and the Year of Learning, I would like to welcome you to this event. We are very happy to have this as one of our featured events this year. For those of you who do not know what the Year of Learning is, there are wonderful little cards at the back of the room that you can take with you. It's basically a year of exploration of important themes and ideas in higher education. And we're kind of using this as a strategic process to help us think about the future of teaching and learning at Stanford and beyond. And so every quarter we have a theme, and this is being winter quarter. The theme that we have is the changing ecology and demography of higher education. And how could we not think about that topic of lifelong learning as part of that? As the university prepares for the future, we obviously have to think about how learning is changing, how careers are changing, how we can prepare people now for a future that seems ever-changing. And so we're very happy to have Phil Pizzo not just moderate this event, but really kind of have the basic idea for this and really push it. He's also on the faculty planning committee for the Year of Learning. And I'm very happy to hand this over to Phil now and just want to welcome you all. Afterwards, there will be a reception, so please help us drink some wine afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Petra, and it's really a great privilege to be here with you today for this Year of Learning event. I think all of us recognize that this is a time of pretty dramatic transition and transformation happening in our society and indeed at our universities. We know that one of the most important predictors for long-term successful life is education. It predicts almost more than anything else how we're going to do. And universities traditionally have played a very important role in equipping young people for the first phase of their life journey. But there are lots of changes that are happening today, and they include two converging forces. One of them is this ever-increasing need to think about what one is going to do with one's life after you graduate from university or college. And the pendulum, as we all know, has been swinging in one way to another, from does one focus, if you will, on a more liberal arts education, or is it important to be equipped with skills that you can immediately import and employ when you get into the world? And this has led to big balance shifts, including here at Stanford in the structured balance between, let's say, arts and humanities and engineering. So the first part of our session today is going to be a panel really thinking about how we traditionally educate young people in undergraduate and graduate years for skills that will equip them for that initial phase of their lives. And we have for this panel, 4 distinguished individuals who will be speaking with us. Soon to walk into the door with great fanfare will be, I know, I can see him coming, so with great fanfare comes Harry Elam. Who is arriving, and as you all know, Harry is the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and just a great spokesperson on the importance of education, and particularly liberal arts education. And then Pam Matson is the Dean for Earth Sciences and Environmental Sciences, a great distinguished scholar. Jennifer Whittam, who's Professor of Computer Science and Electrical Engineering. And my former long-term colleague is Dean Jim Plummer, who is maybe one of the longest surviving deans of the School of Engineering.
Surviving, right?
So there we go. So we're going to just get right started. And the goal for today is that each of our speakers is going to give you several minutes of a kind of perspective from their point of view about where we are and where we're going in terms of traditional education. And then we will open the panel up for interaction and discussion directly with you. And we will do that for about 20 minutes, and then we'll break for a few minutes, and we'll come back to our second panel, and I'll describe that to you when we get to it. So let's get started. Harry, are you mic'd and ready to go?
I'm mic'd and ready to go.
Okay.
In thinking about where we are in terms of education, but also the sense of how it becomes a lifelong journey, I want to talk specifically about Stanford, but I think what I suggest about Stanford has relationships to other schools and other ideas about education more generally. So starting with the notion of this Seuss report that was filed in 2012, and with that it laid 4 goals for a Stanford education, and you'll see I think they're translatable, but I think the important things about these goals is they suggest why and that it's important now to think about experiential learning perhaps more than ever, and also the idea that potentially students have changed a bit, and so what we need to think about in education changes. And all of those things hopefully will carry students into the future. So the first goal of a Stanford education is the idea of owning knowledge. And you know, that's more than just being able to regurgitate it for a test. That's really imbibing it, making part of yourself, embodying knowledge in ways that potentially haven't been done before. And so that may mean hands-on knowledge in a way that hasn't been done before. The second idea is honing skills and capacities. And that's the sense that there are some skills that need to be constantly iterated, constantly practiced, constantly honed, and honed in different arenas. So the easy example is writing. And how writing may be different depending on where you are and what you need to do in terms of what writing assignment you may have. The third dates back potentially to Jane Stanford, and it's the idea of developing personal and social responsibility. That no matter what you do or where you go, the sense of being able to work with other people different from yourself, is critical. Also that sense of responsibility and an ethical way of approaching problem solving, and a sense of somehow we're contributing something to society, that she wanted to create, Jane Stanford, individuals that had a connection to the public good. And that idea, I think, is something we want to carry on and see education translate outside of the 4 years that students spend here to their lifelong pursuits. The fourth one is the notion that we want to develop adaptive learning. And that's the idea that you can take something you have and learn in one arena and apply it to something else. And I think that's critical as we think about what we want our students to gain and what we want that's going to translate to a lifelong learning, and also to the idea that something that's going to carry them or sustain them. And this ability to really think about what's going to happen in one arena and have it apply to something else is critical. Those are the 4 they came up with. I want to add a 5th one for you. And the 5th one I think is critical in terms of Stanford, but in terms of where education needs to go and ideas we need to think about. And that is, and it comes from the D School, so it's not original. So it's the title of David Kelly's book, and that's Creative Confidence. And that we need our students, and it's true, I think, of engineers, of technology, as well as it's true of humanists and scientists, and that is the notion that you need to be able to come at a problem with confidence and think about creative solutions. I think one of the ideas here is that it encourages, no matter what the problem is, you to think that you can find a way. And also it suggests, in terms of our sort of entrepreneurial aesthetic, that failure is probable or possible, and also something you can overcome in the notion of failing forward. So creative confidence is something we want our students to acquire, or as a goal that unites across the campus and unites in thinking about where education, as I suggested, needs to go. One of the things that in the prompt for this that was laid out was a notion of what's a multi-layered thinking about education for the future. And when you think about that sense of multi-layered or laying upon layer, what you might think of undergraduate education then being a foundation. And a foundation that allows growth and development in other areas. And so what do we want in that foundation? Well, I think we want the 4 things that I just laid out. And if I laid out one more thing in terms, it's critical thinking. It's amazing when all of our departments a few years ago had to lay out what were the goals of their particular department and what was the goal of their particular major. Invariably, every one of them talked about critical thinking. So that's a foundation for whatever sort of problem solving or whatever we need to do in terms of the future. And as I mentioned at the start, and I'll stop in a second, that students are changing, and that what we have to do in terms of education is somewhat to change along with them. A friend in physics told me the story of a physics professor who said to her, "I don't know why my course evaluations are going down. I'm doing the same thing that I did 10 years ago." And that sense of change, or the need to change with the times, is something we need to do. So even as we set out these principles, we have to be able to adapt them to this environment and think about how we're going to meet students where they are. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Harry. Pam, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm really pleased to have a chance to participate in this and think about how we go about preparing our students at the undergraduate and graduate level for what I think as multiple and multi-dimensional career paths that they'll need to have in order to work in this incredibly complex and rapidly changing world. So I think about this with my hat on as the Dean of the School of Earth, and if you think about what our students who we are educating today will see in their careers, where they're going to be at, they'll be in a world where the global population grows from 7+ billion to 9 or 10 billion during their careers, where there's lots of needs to be met, people's needs for food and energy and water and shelter, for education, for healthcare, for opportunities, for security. All of these things that are incredibly complicated, and where we are right now in a very inequitable and underserved situation. So they're going to have to be able to problem solve in that kind of world. And that it's a world with extreme complexity, with potential conflict and conflicting demands, and certainly a very, very rapid change and disruption. So that's the framing. How are we educating students to do well and be successful in that world? This is the answer, of course, that's completely up for debate here, and I'm looking forward to everybody else's ideas. But here's a few things that I think about based on, again, the world in which I work. First of all, I think we have to have our students be systems thinkers. They really do have to understand how things are linked and interact and how feedbacks occur. And in our students in our interdisciplinary programs at Stanford, and somewhat third of our undergrads are in interdisciplinary programs, often get that kind of understanding of the systems perspective. In our interdisciplinary programs, students are understanding the connections and interactions between social parts of the system, technological and manufactured parts of our system, natural parts of our system, and people in that mix. And learning that you can't just pay attention to one or the other. You have to understand how the whole system works. And many of them have depth in one area. They may be really deep in economics or in biology or something else, but they understand the system in which they're working. And I think that's a goal for all of our students at Stanford. Everybody, no matter what their major, will benefit by being able to place their knowledge in a much larger system and understand the connections. The second one that Sue's report and Harry just talked about is the importance of learning from experience. I love the emergence of the maker community in engineering. In our school, we might have people working on the new Stanford Educational Farm, learning from experience, or through research. In the field and in the laboratory, there's so much that our students are learning from the experience of research. And that, I think that experience prepares them to see the world in a different way and interact. I also think that something, again, that Stanford is doing more and more is giving our students an opportunity to see the world through the eyes of decision makers, to become empathetic, to begin to understand the challenges that are out there, and begin to think about their knowledge and their package of things they're learning in the context of decision making. And we do that, through the Haas Center and its various activities. We do it through a number of educational programs. Ideally, we have an educational spiral that takes our students from courses to experiential learning to engagement with decision makers and back, and making a very enriched learning environment. And then I guess the final thing I would think, and this one I don't know how to define or how to articulate how we get there, but students with an open mindset, I think, are, leaders with an open mindset are critical to this rapidly changing world. They need to know how to lead collaboratively, to participate in partnerships, to find solutions through team efforts and teamwork, and to get things done in a very complicated world. And again, should we be paying more attention to how they learn how to do that? I think they learn that partly through working with decision makers, but maybe we can do more to make that possible for them. And they have to know and ultimately where and how they can best work to turn the lever or exert pressure to make change happen for the good. And I hope that all of our students do that. I will just end by saying, I think we have some evidence from our own programs that this works. And when I listen to our alums who talk about their very purposeful moving from different kinds of positions through their life as they look for ways in which to engage to be more successful and to make a difference to the world, I love those stories. And I think that's what we want to have, that they're flexible thinkers and they're trying to do good. And they'll keep working at it and moving until they find the right place to do it.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam. Jennifer.
First of all, thank you for the outpouring of cough drops. And I apologize. I don't think I'm the only one who's dealing with a cold these days.
I'm
so
sorry.
I'm going to try to I'll be relatively to the point here before I have another coughing fit. I'm going to talk a little bit about computer science, actually, specifically, which is one of my areas, and the fact that computer science is changing so rapidly that has to be the context of the education that we give our computer scientists. So we can teach our computer scientists the tools that they will need to get a great job when they graduate, and we do that. And they do get great jobs. But those tools are so short-lived. And it's not even just the tools, it's the techniques, the algorithms. The algorithms that they learn now, the tools that they use to program those algorithms, the environments that they program in, are going to change, while they're still young, actually, even early in their careers. So all we can do, I think, is teach these students how to learn and to adapt. And I think we need to teach them sort of the basic ways of thinking, and then we need to teach them how they can rapidly learn today's tool, today's technique, and then move on to the next one when it comes around. So I think that's our main job. How to think computationally, to think about the problems they're solving, and then how to adapt. And I would add that I think, unfortunately, students coming out of high schools these days are particularly unprepared in that regard. I think high schools have turned into a little bit of a factory where they learn how to, they learn the tools, the techniques, sort of the basics, but they don't really come out with an adaptable learn how to learn mindset. So we have a big job that we need to do with these students to prepare them beyond that first job and that first set of tools and techniques, but for a lifelong adaptation to whatever's going to be thrown at them. And I don't think we have any concept at all what today's undergraduates who are computer science majors and who go into the industry will be using and doing even 8 years from now, and certainly not 30 years from now. So that's, I think, my main message, that they need to learn how to adapt. Second of all, if we're going to teach them these more general concepts, I've been thinking about engineering as a whole just more recently because I'm in the dean's office now part-time. And I've been trying to think about what are those components of an engineering education. And I came up with this triangle, and I've tried it on people, and they don't always like it, but I like it. So the triangle has computing on one vertex, it has design on one, and it has making on one. And I think if students can sort of master those concepts, the concept of what computational thinking is about, the concept of design thinking, creativity, it's coming back to what Harry said, on another, and then they can also make stuff and be happy making stuff. You put those three together, and I think you have an incredibly well-rounded engineer. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Right. Jim.
Well, as usual, being last on the panel, there's not much left to say, but I'll try and make a few. I'm going to repeat many of the comments you've heard. Perhaps I'll say them in slightly different words that might be helpful in broadening some of the concepts. So when I have thought about these issues, I think of universities basically in some sense as service providers. And we need to ask ourselves what our customers, that is our students, actually need to be successful in their lives and in their careers. And as I've thought about those issues, it's been helpful to me to kind of parse the problem into three different segments: undergraduate education, master's level or professional education, and PhD level education, which is really what universities do. So let me just make a couple comments about each of those three levels. So at the undergraduate level, repeating what you've already heard, we have no way to, especially in technical fields, we have no way to predict what our students are going to be doing 5 years from now, much less 10 or 20 years from now. So the historical concept in engineering in particular, which is an applied set of disciplines, that we can actually cram into our students' heads in 4 years the skills they're going to need for a 40-year career, is complete garbage. I mean, it just makes no sense today. It probably made no sense 25 years ago, although most people believe it. So when I ask what should our more technical students know today, and I think about it really in terms of a set of what I call life skills as opposed to technical skills. And I'll give you a quick list of 7 here that I think are critical life skills for technology-oriented students to have. Obviously, technology fundamentals, and that would have been probably the only one on the list 20 years ago for engineering kinds of students. Technical literacy for all students. I actually worry a lot that a lot of Stanford undergraduates who are non-science and engineering majors are not leaving this place with much in the way of technical literacy. An appreciation for the arts and humanities, and that's part of what you can do if you back off a little bit on the idea that we can cram into our students' head everything they need in 4 years to be successful in a technical career. Passion for learning and the skills to be a successful lifelong learner. You heard this already. The ability to work in a diverse team environment, which is critical for almost everything that happens in engineering. The skill to innovate and to approach projects with a creative flair, an entrepreneurial mindset. These are perhaps in different words the things that Harry and others have said. So in my opinion, if you look at that list of 7 or Harry's list of 5, by far the best way to accomplish that kind of training for our students, that kind of education for our students, is in a residential educational program. I just can't see any way to replace a residential experience and develop those kinds of skills in our students. Many of these skills that I listed and others listed are experiential. They are not skills that are easily learned in the classroom. And so that's part of why the residential experience, I think, is tremendously important. Also, because they're experiential, they're inherently very expensive. And so this makes it very difficult to think about ways to cut down the cost of an undergraduate education in a serious way, unless you really want to back off on some of these life skills that we probably think are important. And in fact, in my opinion, part of the reason that we've seen such an upsurge in the numbers of undergraduates here picking engineering as a major is because we've reconfigured a lot of undergraduate engineering majors to emphasize life skills as much as they emphasize the technical skills, the D-School, the entrepreneurship program, and so on, that are part of most engineering students' education. So if we jump to the master's level, professional education, for engineering and science majors, this increasingly, I think, means lifelong learning. The half-life, Jennifer said it, the half-life of engineering knowledge is 3 to 5 years. And whatever we teach them, however well we teach them, it's out of date in 3 to 5 years. So we just have to forget the idea that we're going to give them all the technical information they need. So in my view, the only economically feasible way to provide lifelong education is through online methods. I just don't see that it's feasible to bring people back to campus, interrupt careers and so on, and put them in a classroom experience on campus to develop lifelong engineering technical skills. So this field, in fact, may well be dominated by commercial entities like Coursera and others who probably are more skilled at delivering that kind of information than arguably universities are. Certainly what individuals working in industry don't need is access to traditional classroom experiences. They need information in very different ways, and either universities have to get good at that or that field will be dominated, I think, by commercial companies. Elite programs like the DCI program and the Knights Fellows and so on are tremendous programs, but in reality they aren't scalable, and they only deal with very small numbers of people. And so they are not well, they are wonderful programs, they are not a solution to the larger program of lifelong learning and education for large numbers of people. At the PhD level, that's fundamentally a one-on-one experience, residential experience between a student and a faculty member, and I don't think that's going to change very much in the foreseeable future. So just to summarize, I think the two biggest changes we're going to see over the next decade or two are, one, undergraduate education changing to be much broader, incorporating much more in the way of liberal arts and humanities, creativity, design thinking, all these words you've heard, for all majors, but particularly for technical majors where it's really been lacking. And secondly, I think there's a real chance that the professional education, master's level, in fact, may well be accomplished primarily by outside entities and not by universities.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim, and thanks all of you. I think that there are some common themes that we've heard. One of the really interesting ones is just the evanescence of knowledge and how rapidly it cycles and how much we need to acquire new insights and new information. And that, also depends a lot on what field you happen to be in as well, because there are some areas that have static knowledge that continue almost forever. I mean, I was a philosophy major in college, and the body of philosophy hasn't changed all that much. So you acquired a corpus of knowledge and you kind of perfect it as you go forward. But I think in the areas of certainly technology and science, things are changing very rapidly. Now, I think one of the questions that no one has raised yet in their opening comments is, what's the right balance for any one individual student or for a university? I mean, you could almost deduce an argument, and Harry, I'll challenge you with this a little bit, that your three colleagues made a compelling case for everybody doing engineering and computer science. What does that mean, for those who might be interested in art or art history or other areas that are important to speak to?
You mentioned the humanities. Yeah, and first, in answering that, I'd start off too by saying, even in philosophy or any field where you're dealing with text, it's not static. I mean, in the sense that
maybe it was just me.
No, it's the way of looking at it changes over time.
Yeah, no, I understand. I appreciate that.
And so the sense of things changing over time, I think you're absolutely right, Phil, was a constant theme we saw here. And so when students look at majors, only 27% are going to find a major that leads directly to where they're going to end up. Mm-hmm. So they've got to be able to shift. And I love Jennifer's point that as we look at computer science, 10 years from now, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
5 years from now, it's going to be, that sense of change. So then, what does that mean? Well, what I'd say about the humanities and the social sciences, which, as you probably know, are down across the country, 26% in terms of social sciences around the country, is that we need for students to understand that the kind of complex problems that they're going to see today really take integrated solutions, potentially solutions that we haven't seen before, that have to be informed by knowledge in terms of social science, by knowledge in terms of humanities as a way of looking at things, by knowledge in terms of technology, in terms of that. As Jim said, I think also that given the challenge of today and that so many of our students want to be engineers, we want them to be engineers that are informed. Yes, for the sense of social good, but yes, for the sense of how they understand the humanistic world that they're going to problem solve in. So if they don't have an understanding for social difference, how are they going to be able to create certain systems? So I think that type of knowledge has to work hand in hand, and that's what I want to see happen.
Great. So I think what will make our time together most meaningful is to become interactive. So we have at least one microphone that we're going to pass around. Petra, are you going to do that? Why don't you raise your questions? If it's to a specific person, please do so, and let's see where we go. We'll take about at least 15 minutes for this phase.
Two things. One of them is I had the opportunity to teach in overseas studies several times, and to me it was just a spectacular opportunity for the students. I loved it, but the students I thought was spectacular. And everything that I've heard about interdisciplinary and different kinds of people is supported so well with overseas studies. And I was just struck that none of you mentioned it. I hope that it's in your thinking. The second thing is that I think about 1950, C.P. Snow talked about the two worlds. And 60 years later, we're still talking about it.
Right.
And what have we learned in the last 60 years, and how do we do better in the next at least decade than we have in the last 60?
Yeah.
So if I can touch on them really quickly, in terms of overseas studies, we want to get to a point where about 60% of Stanford undergraduates go overseas. Right now it's around 50 or so, and higher, and depending on, but in the four top disciplines right now, it's four top majors, excuse me, which are CS, hum bio, bio, and engineering more generally. Only 40% of the students are going overseas. 91% of the students who do go overseas say it's transformative. So we need to build those numbers up in those areas. Why aren't they going? You could probably guess why. Because they don't think they can fulfill their program if they go abroad. So one of the things we've done this year is we have a STEM quarter in Paris. It's an easy sell. Paris in the springtime is an easy sell, right? To students, to anybody, to faculty. Paris in the winter has been harder. So there were 7 students that was it, who wanted to go to Paris in the winter. We've now added this idea of doing STEM. They're going to take biochemistry. They can take also a chemistry course and a bio course. And those numbers are up to 39 students going abroad in the winter. So that is something we have to look at. But in terms of your sense of the experience of it, experiential learning, engaging in difference, cultural immersion, all of those things happen overseas. So yeah, it's critical, I think, hopefully, to a Stanford education.
Great. Sorry?
There was a second part to that question?
Well, the other comment was about C.P. Snow and the two worlds of the humanities and the sciences.
Yeah.
And 60 years ago, they were separate places.
Yeah, and I mean, in his famous article on that, I think it's like 59 or something when he wrote it, 54. What I would say to this, and I spoke about this actually at the Faculty Senate, is that what I would love to see is new harmonies across the two cultures. And so for me, I'm in theater and performance studies, and the easiest one to see is the relationship to art and technology. And there's no reason that Stanford shouldn't be leading in that. You know, when I see so many things that are happening elsewhere, that's someplace I think we can go. But I think when I talked about the sort of complex problems that need those integrative solutions, that's what will bring the two schools, bring two cultures rather together.
You know, if I could just add to that, you're right. I mean, there have been historically two worlds, but if we're going to create synergies and overlap and partnerships, there has to be equal effort on both sides. And it's insufficient, you know, just for the engineering school, for example, to say that we want our students to be involved more in the humanities and the liberal arts. There has to be an equal partnership coming from that half of campus. And just as one example, I don't think I'm saying anything untoward here, but the product design program in the School of Engineering, which was founded 40 years ago, something like that. When it was founded, it was a joint venture between mechanical engineering and the art department. And the courses were taught roughly equally by art and by engineering at that time. And that's really no longer the case. It really has a home now, which is much more in the School of Engineering, although there are faculty from outside engineering who participate in it, from business and so on. But part of the issue, I think, has been that finding ways to appoint tenure-line faculty in some of the humanities and social sciences departments who have interests, you know, that overlap with engineering, and vice versa, has been very, very difficult given the traditional structure of universities. And so I think that's, if we want these programs to be engaged in by regular tenure-line faculty, we really need to think about how we can appoint faculty in both parts of the university who engage in activities which are of interest to the other part of the university. It's been a historic, significant problem.
Pam, did you want to add to that?
Just from a bottom-up kind of perspective on that, I think anyway, when I look at graduate students that I'm selecting, have put great value on, you know, the English major and biology or chemistry major, the people who are bringing history and computer science together. And they have special talents that, that at least many of us begin to recognize. And the more we can bring in students who have that, the more we can send that message back that this isn't going to get in your way. It's actually going to be something that really sets you as a special player.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Fun fact.
Whoop, go for it.
In computer science PhD admissions, it's, I'm not sure whether it's been entirely quantified, but it's well recognized that the best predictor of success for an incoming computer science PhD student is their verbal GRE score.
Right.
That's fascinating.
That's why my son is one. Yep.
Okay.
Interesting.
I found all of your comments to be thought-provoking and sort of reminded me that when I was a resident fellow, I would often think that my client was not the student today, but the student 10 years from now. And I'm wondering, what is the time frame that you think of for our students today in terms of who you're really trying to serve?
Well, I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I'll make a couple of comments. I think we have to think as far out as we can, and that's balanced by the fact that changing anything in a university has a time constant of a decade, and it's just really, really hard to make changes in a structure which is developed over hundreds of years or longer and is focused around traditional disciplines. And so many of the things that we've talked about and so on are ideas and ways of getting more interdisciplinary kinds of things and recognizing our students are going to have multiple careers when they graduate and making sure they get the set of life skills when they graduate. And so I don't think anyone disagrees with any of that. But how to implement change within the university is, at least in my experience, a very difficult thing.
Yeah. It's interesting, in our school we have interdisciplinary programs and programs in the departments that are more disciplinary. And the interdisciplinary programs work incredibly hard to keep changing. They're always looking at what the students are looking for and what the faculty are willing to do and so forth, that they're continuously asking how to expand or change their program. And I don't think the department programs do nearly as much, probably for a lot of reasons, including the stability of having faculty in the department. But I've often thought we all ought to be like those interdisciplinary programs that are constantly asking the question, what are the students really asking for? What do we think they really need? And with the world changing around us. So maybe we need to all work that way.
Great, thank you.
So thanks to the panel and the moderator for a very interesting discussion. I want to get back to the issue of professional education for a moment. And I think that research universities like Stanford actually have a very important role to play in graduate professional education. But I agree with Jim, it's not going to happen mostly at the master's level, it's going to mostly happen beyond that. But I think for industries that are being dramatically impacted by technological change, the construction industry in which I work is one of those that's going through an absolute revolution right now. The master students who come out of our residential program, in which we have lots of project activities and so on, really are significantly different, and the industry views them differently, prices them differently, puts them into leadership positions. But I have another thought about that, because the cost of online education, the marginal cost, if we're developing online education anyway for a paying clientele, which we do through SCPD rather than the MOOC model, the marginal cost of offering it to one more student is almost zero. So one of the ways that we can make our Stanford students feel that the investment they make in their Stanford education is really one in lifelong education is to make all of those online courses available to them for free for the rest of their lives if they get a degree at Stanford. That's an idea I floated, and in the executive education program I direct, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, at Stanford, the majority of the students who enroll are not Stanford alums. There's a fairly small number of Stanford alums. We'd be basically giving a free pass to those courses. So I think that if we offered that opportunity, we could continue to refresh the how to do it practical, the latest computer programming language, Jennifer, or the latest engineering technology, Jim, or earth sciences, Pam, or medicine, Dean Pizzo. I think we could actually make the Stanford education itself worth $250,000 to an undergraduate, or $60,000 to $100,000 for a master's student.
Great,
So maybe if I just quickly comment on that, I don't disagree with anything you said, Ray. I think universities, technical schools and so on absolutely could play a significant role in professional education. The problem is, at least in my experience, that asking what the students out there want is not what we currently have. I mean, what really they don't want is access to a quarter-long standard classroom kind of a course. And so if we're going to play a big role in professional education, we're going to have to develop short courses and just-in-time learning kinds of things, little snippets of information and so on. And to ask our faculty to do that, the first question that comes back is, okay, so what am I not going to do that I'm currently doing? And I'm now teaching undergraduate classes, I'm teaching graduate classes, I've got a PhD program, and so on. So what is it you don't want me to do if you want me to develop these short, just-in-time kinds of professional education opportunities? So we could do it. I just don't know that there's the bandwidth to do it without making some really hard decisions about what we're not going to do that we are doing.
Okay, so we're going to take, do you have the microphone? We're going to take one more question, and we'll take a short break. You've got
This is for Harry Elam about undergraduate education. A few years ago, we shifted to a ways of doing, ways of knowing system. And I'm wondering how that has worked out in terms of some of the goals that you've put forward for the undergraduate life here. Are we able to look at how that change has affected student life?
Thanks, Patricia. What she's talking about is a change that we made in terms of the breadth system, where most breadth systems at universities are looking at disciplinary breadth, that you have to have a humanities course and a science course, et cetera, et cetera. The ways of thinking, ways of doing look more at capacities and saying that there's certain skill areas where we want students to know. There's 8 different areas where they have to take 11 different courses. And significantly, I think one of them, well, 2 of them. One is ethical reasoning, and they can do it across the board in a number of ways. And one of them may be in terms of ethical questions, in terms of engineering or technology, where critical questions are being asked and they need to think about, for example. Then another one is engaging diversity. So students have to take a course that makes them look at questions of difference and how matters of difference across ethnic, economic, geographic lines, saying that looking at difference is critical to being a 21st century citizen. And actually, let me say one more. They have to take a course in creative expression. And that is, they have to take a course in arts, practice, or design. So they actually can take a course in product design to fulfill it. So what's interesting, what we know so far, Pat, because it's just not far out now to know what they're doing. But a pattern has developed, and students are fulfilling scientific method and analysis. They're fulfilling right now up front as well formal reasoning, because that's courses in math. It's also CS 106A is the most popular course at the university. It's sort of a implicit requirement to be a student at Stanford. You gotta take CS 106A. Great. So I mean, they finished that, but right now, of the sophomores or people, juniors who are required to do the ways, only 45% have taken the 3 that I mentioned before. And so they're waiting in terms of those, and why they are, it's not yet clear.
Great. So before we end, the leader of our year of learning looks like he's got a microphone in hand and ready to...
I had a question if you have time. So thank you very much for all of your good thoughts. I wanted to ask about the question of lifelong learning from a different standpoint. And we talked a little bit about what we would like to offer our students. So my question is, from the point of view of an educator, what do you draw on in order to offer something that has lasting value to your students? What life experiences do we have as educators that inform us and help us provide something of lasting value? And are there ways that we should structure our activities, or we might engage in different practices at the university that might strengthen our ability to offer things of that sort?
It's a great question. I'm going to make a moderator decision here, because that's a really provocative question that can be going on for a while, and I want to be sensitive to the transition. But I think, John, there's a way of being able to address that in the next panel, and I'll tell you why when you come back. Okay? So
foreshadowing.
So I want you to stay. Now here's the rule. Here's the point. We're going to switch panels. We're going to have about 5 to 7 minutes, just enough time to get the new group mic. Probably not enough time for everyone to go up for the reception, but enough time to stretch. It's not good to sit for too long. So think of this as helping your health by getting you to rise. And then we'll continue. We have a lot of students and I think very interesting issues to come forward. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Parker.
Thanks, Harry.